I forgot my purse that day. It sounds small, ordinary, the kind of mistake anyone could make, but if I hadn't turned back, I would have never discovered the betrayal that had been happening right in front of me for years. And that whisper from the manager, "You might want to watch the security video, but not here," changed everything. I used to believe my family was my safest place. Not perfect, not warm all the time, but solid, predictable, loyal. I was the dependable one, the daughter who never asked for much, the sister who always showed up, the woman who held everything together while quietly swallowing her own feelings. That's what made the betrayal hurt so deeply. Because when family betrayal happens, it doesn't feel like an argument. It feels like the ground quietly disappearing beneath your feet. At the time, I didn't know I was already living inside a slow-burning relationship drama. I just thought I was tired, overreacting, too sensitive. That's how gaslighting works. It convinces you that your instincts are the problem. Looking back now, the signs were everywhere. The way conversations stopped when I entered the room, the way my mother would smile but never quite meet my eyes. The decisions were made about me, never with me. Still, I kept telling myself this was normal, because admitting betrayal from your own family feels worse than being wrong. The day it all began was supposed to be simple. I stopped by a small cafe near my workplace after a long shift. Same place I'd been going for years, same counter, same security camera near the door that I never paid attention to. I ordered my usual, paid, left. And halfway down the block, my stomach dropped. My purse. I turned around immediately, already embarrassed, already rehearsing how I'd apologize for the inconvenience. When I stepped back inside, the cafe was quiet. Too quiet. The manager looked at me differently this time, not annoyed, not distracted, concerned. He asked me to wait near the counter while he went to the back. A few seconds passed. Then he leaned close and lowered his voice. "I don't usually do this," he said, "but you should see what happened after you left." That was the moment my body reacted before my mind could. My chest tightened, my hands went cold. I didn't even know what I was afraid of yet. I just knew something was wrong. He gestured toward the security monitor, and suddenly this wasn't about a forgotten purse anymore. This was about revenge I hadn't even planned yet, and karma that had already started moving. I want to stop here and ask you something. Have you ever had that feeling? That quiet moment when everything still looks normal, but deep down you know your life is about to split into before and after? Because that's exactly where I was standing, right before the truth. Before I tell you what I saw on that screen, you need to understand who I was before everything fell apart. Because betrayal doesn't destroy you all at once. It erodes you quietly until one day there's nothing to stand on. I was the kind of daughter people praised behind my back. Responsible, reliable, the strong one. I paid my own bills early, helped my younger sibling whenever they needed it, showed up to every family gathering even when I was exhausted. I believed loyalty was something you earned by giving more of yourself, and my family knew that. That's the part that still hurts the most. My mother had a way of making control sound like concern. She'd say things like, "I'm just worried about you," or, "You know we only want what's best." But somehow what was best never included my voice. Decisions about finances, about holidays, about my own time. They were discussed without me, then presented as facts I was expected to accept. If I questioned it, I was being dramatic. If I pushed back, I was creating relationship drama. Classic gaslighting. I didn't have the language for it back then. I just felt constantly wrong, like I was failing at being a good daughter. That's how family betrayal hides so well. It doesn't scream, it whispers. Around that time, things started disappearing. Small things at first. Cash missing from my wallet, documents slightly out of place, messages that were read but never answered. Whenever I asked, I was met with confusion. Why would anyone do that? You must have misplaced it. You're imagining things. I told myself the same lies, because believing in betrayal meant accepting a truth I wasn't ready for, that the people I trusted most might be exploiting me. Back at the cafe, standing near that security monitor, all those memories came rushing back. The manager hesitated. "I don't want to cause trouble," he said, but I recognized someone. My heart skipped. Recognized who? He rewound the footage. I watched myself leave the cafe, checking my phone, distracted, purse still under the chair, and then someone stepped into the frame. Someone who shouldn't have been there. Someone I knew. In that moment, my brain tried to protect me. This must be a misunderstanding. There's a logical explanation. Family wouldn't do this. But karma doesn't need permission to arrive. It just waits until you're finally ready to see the truth. What I was watching wasn't just proof of theft. It was proof of betrayal. Proof that this wasn't a single mistake. It was part of a pattern. A slow, calculated erosion of trust, the kind that turns love into leverage. And standing there, staring at that screen, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just about my purse. This was about revenge I hadn't even planned yet, and karma that had already started moving. I didn't confront anyone. Not after watching that video. Not after my hands started shaking. Not after my stomach twisted into something cold and heavy. Because deep down, I already knew something worse than theft was happening. I smiled at the manager, thanked him, picked up my purse like nothing had changed. But everything had. On the walk home, my mind replayed every moment from the past few years. Every time I'd been told I was overthinking. Every time my concerns were minimized. Every time I'd been made to feel guilty for asking basic questions. That security video didn't create the betrayal, it confirmed it. And confirmation is dangerous because it forces you to choose. Explode or observe. I chose silence. Over the next few weeks, I started paying attention in ways I never had before. I noticed how my mother always knew my schedule, how she casually mentioned things I never told her, how my siblings suddenly had access to money they shouldn't. When I asked harmless questions, the answers came too fast, too rehearsed. Gaslighting has a rhythm. Once you hear it, you can't unhear it. They weren't just lying, they were coordinating. Family dinners became performances. My mother would laugh loudly, touch my arm, ask about my day, all while subtly steering conversations away from finances. If I brought up boundaries, the room would shift. I'd be met with silence, then disappointment, then the familiar line, "Why are you being so negative?" That's how relationship drama is manufactured, not through conflict, but through emotional manipulation. I started keeping notes, dates, times, things that didn't add up. I checked my bank statements more carefully, not because I expected to find something, but because I was terrified of what I might find. And I did. Small transfers, always under an amount that would trigger alerts, always explained away as helping the family, except no one had asked me. This wasn't chaos, this was strategy. And the realization hurt more than anger ever could. Because betrayal from strangers is painful, but family betrayal rewrites your entire understanding of love. I wasn't being careless, I was being used. Still, I stayed quiet. Revenge doesn't rush. It watches. It waits. It lets people reveal exactly who they are and how far they're willing to go. And the more I observed, the clearer it became. They didn't think I'd ever push back. They believed I was too loyal, too forgiving, too afraid of breaking the family image. They were wrong. But karma doesn't strike when you're emotional. It strikes when you're prepared. I remember lying in bed one night, staring at the ceiling, realizing something that made my chest ache. They weren't worried about hurting me. They were worried about losing access. That's when the betrayal stopped feeling personal and started feeling predictable. And predictability is power. The breaking point didn't come with shouting. There was no dramatic confrontation, no raised voices, no slammed doors. It came quietly, which somehow made it worse. It happened on a Sunday afternoon. We were all sitting in the living room. The TV was on, but no one was watching. My mother was scrolling on her phone. My sibling sat across from me, unusually tense. I wasn't planning to say anything, but then my mother smiled and said, "You should really be more careful with your money." The room went still. My heart started pounding. That sentence wasn't concern. It was a warning. I asked calmly, "What do you mean?" She didn't look at me when she answered. "Things go missing. You forget where you put them. We worry." There it was, the gaslighting laid out perfectly. My sibling nodded, and in that moment, something inside me cracked. Not loudly, not violently, just enough for the truth to slip through. I realized they weren't afraid of being caught. They were confident I'd doubt myself again. That was the real betrayal. I excused myself and went to my room. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my hands, trying to breathe. Every memory replayed differently now. Every "you're imagining things." Every "we're just helping." Every time I'd been made to feel ungrateful. I wasn't confused anymore. I was devastated. Because betrayal doesn't just break trust, it breaks identity. I cried, but silently. Not because I was weak, but because I finally understood how long this had been happening. Years. And the hardest part wasn't the money. It was knowing they'd looked at me every day and chosen to lie. That night, I made a decision. Not out of anger, out of clarity. I wasn't going to confront them, I wasn't going to beg for honesty, and I wasn't going to expose them yet. Because emotional reactions give manipulators exactly what they want: control. Instead, I sat in the dark and did something far more dangerous. I planned. I replayed every detail, every transaction, every excuse. I saw the pattern clearly now, and patterns can be used. This wasn't about revenge fueled by rage. This was about karma guided by patience. They believed I was still blind, still dependent, still desperate to keep the peace. They had no idea this was the moment everything shifted. The moment I stopped being the victim in this relationship drama and became the quiet observer. I went to sleep that night with swollen eyes and a calm I hadn't felt in years, because for the first time, the truth wasn't crushing me, it was grounding me. I didn't change overnight. That's the mistake people expect you to make. They think revenge looks like anger, like confrontation, like walking out and burning bridges. But the most effective revenge, it looks like compliance. I became quieter, more agreeable. If my mother asked about my finances, I smiled and said everything was fine. If my sibling hinted about needing help, I nodded and said I'd think about it. I gave them exactly what they wanted: security. Because when people feel safe exploiting you, they get careless. The first thing I did was separate my life, quietly. New bank account, different email, updated passwords. No announcements, no explanations, just distance. Then I started documenting everything: screenshots, statements, dates. Not because I planned to expose them immediately, but because truth has weight when it's organized, and karma needs structure. What surprised me most wasn't how easy it was how predictable they became. Without access to my money, small cracks started forming. Bills were suddenly confusing. Expenses didn't add up. Stories conflicted. And I didn't point it out. I let the silence do the work. At family gatherings, I watched instead of participating. I noticed how my mother would glance at my purse, just a second too long. How my sibling avoided eye contact when finances came up. The same people who once gaslit me were now subtly panicking. Because manipulation only works when the target stays unaware. One evening, my mother confronted me, softly. "You've been distant," she said. "Is something wrong?" I met her eyes and smiled. "No," I replied. "I'm just focusing on myself." That sentence terrified her more than any accusation ever could. This phase of revenge wasn't about punishment. It was about reflection. I gave them space to feel the consequences of their own behavior without me lifting a finger. And slowly the dynamic shifted. They started arguing with each other, blaming each other, rewriting stories. Betrayal has a way of turning inward when there's no longer a scapegoat. The most satisfying part? They never suspected revenge. They believed karma was coincidence, bad luck, stress. They never realized they were standing inside the result of their own choices. I didn't feel powerful. I felt calm. Because revenge driven by anger consumes you, but silent revenge, it frees you. I stopped trying to be understood. I stopped explaining myself. And in doing so, I reclaimed something I didn't even realize I'd lost. My dignity. Karma didn't arrive loudly. It didn't kick the door down or demand an apology. It arrived the way truth always does, through consequences. It started with a phone call. My mother's voice was tight, controlled in a way that told me she was already losing. "There's been a misunderstanding," she said, "with some accounts." I listened. Didn't interrupt, didn't correct her language. Because when people who rely on manipulation lose control, they expose themselves. Apparently, money had gone missing. Not from me this time, from them. Funds they assumed would be there weren't. Bills bounced, excuses failed, and suddenly I wasn't the careless one anymore. They tried to loop me back in gently, asked questions that sounded like concern, offered family meetings. I declined, politely. "I'm not involved in that anymore," I said. That sentence landed harder than any accusation ever could. Without access to my resources, the fragile structure they'd built began to collapse. Old lies couldn't cover new gaps, stories contradicted each other, tension filled the house, and for the first time, I wasn't inside it. I was watching from a distance. The real moment karma struck came unexpectedly. A relative, someone neutral, noticed inconsistencies in shared expenses. Questions were asked, documents reviewed, and suddenly the narrative shifted. No one pointed at me. No one needed to. The truth had its own gravity. My mother called again days later. This time her voice was smaller. "We didn't mean for things to go this far." That was the closest thing to accountability I would ever get, and I didn't chase more, because closure doesn't always come from apologies. Sometimes it comes from clarity. They never admitted betrayal outright, but they didn't deny it either. And in that silence, karma spoke clearly. They lost trust, they lost control, and most importantly, they lost access to me. I felt something unexpected. Not joy, relief. Because revenge isn't about watching someone suffer. It's about watching the truth finally stand on its own. This wasn't a dramatic ending. There was no courtroom, no public exposure, just the quiet realization that their actions had consequences. and that I no longer needed to carry the weight of their choices. After everything settled, I expected to feel victorious. I didn't. There was no rush of triumph, no moment where I thought, I won. What I felt instead was quiet, a kind of stillness I wasn't used to. For a long time, my life had revolved around managing emotions that weren't mine, keeping the peace, smoothing over tension, absorbing guilt that didn't belong to me. When that stopped, there was space, and space can feel terrifying when you're not used to it. I grieved more than the betrayal. I grieved the version of family I thought I had, the version where loyalty was mutual, where love didn't come with conditions, where trust didn't have an expiration date. Accepting that loss hurt more than confronting the truth, because family betrayal forces you to rewrite your past. I had to learn something uncomfortable. You can love people and still walk away from how they treat you. That lesson didn't come easily. There were nights I questioned myself, wondered if I'd been too harsh, if I'd misunderstood. That's the residue of gaslighting. It lingers. But clarity has a way of returning when you honor your boundaries. Slowly, I rebuilt. Not dramatically, just intentionally. I stopped over-explaining, stopped proving my worth, stopped sacrificing peace for approval. And something changed. The relationship drama that once consumed me disappeared, not because the people changed, but because I did. I realized revenge had never been the goal. Freedom was. Revenge just happened to be the path that led me there. And karma? Karma didn't punish them, it corrected the imbalance. Today, my relationship with my family is distant but honest. No pretending, no access without respect. They know I see clearly now, and that knowledge changed everything. The biggest lesson? Betrayal doesn't mean you failed at loving. It means you outgrew people who benefited from your silence. If you're listening to this and recognizing pieces of your own life, trust that feeling. Pay attention to patterns, respect your instincts. Because the moment you stop protecting those who hurt you, healing begins. I'll leave you with this question. If someone you trusted crossed a line, would you confront them or would you let karma handle it?